Rise of the European Emperor by Taishan Laonyo.
Chapter 291, 10,000 British Girlfriends. Reclaiming wasteland for arable land requires a lot of labor. However, herding sheep does not require too much labor. While recruiting immigrants to develop the North Munster area, Marin did not give up the development of animal husbandry. For example, last fall, Marin organized 1,500 English semi-fine wool ewes to go to Leon, Western Sahara, to find male merino sheep there to borrow seeds. After nearly half a year of pregnancy, these ewes gave birth to lambs one after another. After identification by wool spinning industry professionals, it was found that this kind of mixed-blood sheep is indeed finer and higher quality than the wool of English semi-fine wool sheep. However, it is still not as good as the wool quality of merino sheep. However, this is not fixed. Some lambs have coarser wool, close to the mother's English semi-fine wool sheep. And some lambs have finer wool, closer to the father's merino sheep. Marin even breeds to select the best, so those lambs with finer wool and close to the quality of merino wool are selected separately and recombined. The fathers of these lambs are all marked. Marin ordered breeders not to allow inbreeding between lambs of the same father. For the rest, try to let the lambs with fine wool grow up and breed with each other to cultivate a stable fine wool breed. After selection, 700 fine wool lambs were selected from the 2,800 lambs born by 1,500 British sheep used to cultivate new fine wool breeds. As for the remaining 2,100 lambs, although the wool weight may not be as good as the other 700 lambs, it is also good. At least, the quality of their wool is better than that of British semi-fine wool sheep. After that, Marin raised the 700 mixed-blood lambs with very fine wool, reaching the level of fine wool sheep, separately, and specially hired 2 disciples of Morigen to take care of them to ensure their health. When they grow to 12 months old, select rams and ewes of different paternal lines to breed to obtain a stable sheep breed. When both parents are fine wool, it is easy to cultivate a stable fine wool breed. Mixed breeds are unstable, and may be more like the mother or the father. But if 2 mixed breeds that are more like the father continue to breed, there is a great possibility that they will produce a breed that is more like the father. However, Marin felt that the mere 700 fine wool lambs were too few. So, the 10,000 ewes that Fan Gaulay brought back through the North Sea Chamber of Commerce were loaded on the ship again and set off on the journey to the Leon Merino sheep breeding base to find a husband. Because there were as many as 10,000 merino sheep, Marin seemed to attach great importance to it. Therefore, he transferred most of the ships of the shipping company to transport ewes to Western Sahara to find a husband. At the same time, in order to ensure the safety of the fleet, Marin sent all the warships to escort the sheep transport fleet southward. In this way, the scale of the sheep transport fleet reached 85 ships. Among them, there were 50 sheep transport ships and 35 escort warships, 10 500-ton warships and 25 250 class armed merchant ships. When 85 large ships of more than 200 tons passed through the English Channel, the British Navy and the French Navy, who were facing each other across the sea, were shocked. Especially the British Navy, at this critical moment of life and death, thought that this new fleet was a helper found by the French, and almost launched an active attack. Fortunately, Johnson finally endured it and did not attack rashly, otherwise, the 35 East Frisian warships would definitely teach the British Navy a lesson in minutes. After all, they were all gunboats with complete ammunition. However, unless it was absolutely necessary, the fleet under Marin's command would not take the initiative to provoke the British fleet. Although it can be won in battle, the consumption of gunpowder in naval battles is too great. After a large sea battle, although it can be won, the gunpowder will be almost consumed. Marin, who is used to preparing for a rainy day, has long ordered the navy to restrain itself. Therefore, when this fleet passed through the English Channel, it sailed along the center line of the strait, impartially, expressing his attitude of not wanting to get involved in the conflict between Britain and France. After seeing that Marin's fleet chose to sail in the middle, the British finally breathed a sigh of relief. At least, that was not the enemy's fleet. You know, the British Navy now has only more than 100 warships. And there are also 50 or 60 warships on the French side. If this fleet with 80 or 90 large ships stands on the French side, the British Navy will be in trouble. If the British Navy is in trouble, then the country of Britain will also be in trouble. Because if the main force of the British Navy is finished, the English Channel will be undefended for the French. At that time, the French will transport the main force of the army to the other side. And at this time, Britain is at its weakest. Because the main force of the army is on the island of Ireland, as long as the main force of the French army can cross the sea and surround London, it would be a piece of cake to destroy Britain. The French, on the other hand, feel very sorry. Because it would be great if the British clashed with this huge fleet. In this way, this fleet and the British Navy will suffer a loss, and the French fleet can take advantage of it to destroy the British fleet. However, the British seemed very restrained and did not dare to take the initiative to provoke. And this fleet was also very honest and sailed directly to the middle line. Then, this fleet just disappeared in the English Channel. At this time, there are now more than 800 merino sheep in the Layoun oasis in Western Sahara, thousands of miles away. The dry climate in Western Sahara is very suitable for the breeding of merino sheep. Therefore, in the past 3 years, the 100 pairs of merino sheep in Western Sahara have expanded to more than 400 pairs. The number of rams has reached 408. However, at this moment, these 408 merino rams do not know that they will usher in a new batch of British girlfriends. Moreover, this time, the number of these British girlfriends is a bit large, with a total of a terrifying 10,000. In other words, these 408 rams, on average, each sheep can get 24.5***. I just don't know if there will be any merino rams that die after this breeding. After all, it is really difficult for a ram to breed with 24.5 ewes. Besides, breeding is not successful in one go. Often, a ram and a ewe need to try several times. Maybe those single sheep will envy them. However, having too many ewes does not necessarily mean happiness. Anyway, no matter whether those rams like those British ewes or not, they must have sex with them. Whether it is Bing Bing in the sheep world or Fungia, they must have sex with all of them. Think about it, if the ewes they are assigned are all Bing Bing in the ewe world, then the rams may enjoy it. But if it is unlucky, and all the ewes they are assigned are Fungia in the ewe world, and they have to have sex with them at least 24 times, anyone would collapse. So, breeding with no choice of partners may not be enjoyable. 10,000 British girlfriends, is coming, and I don't know if the 408 merino rams in Western Sahara are ready. Will they still have enough kidneys by then? Chapter 292, I almost forgot that I am still a great chief. The weather in August is still quite hot, although East Frisia is not very hot in summer because it is close to the North Sea. However, that is also compared with the summer in China. In the summer in China, high temperatures of 35 or 36 degrees are very common and 38 or 39 degrees are not uncommon. Such high temperatures are really hot and people dare not go out. In the summer in the German region, it is hot during the day but cool at night, which is equivalent to the heat of June or September in China. Anyway, although it is not particularly hot, it is definitely not cool. In such weather, Marin transferred a batch of saltpeter from the arsenal, played saltpeter ice making, and made a few cream ice creams. Although the workmanship was very crude, Marin was happy to eat it because he made it by himself. On the side, Angela, Felice and little Caesar also ate happily. Only Robert, because he was too young, could not eat too cold things. When Marin was eating ice cream with his wives and 2 sons, a guard suddenly came to report that the Sami people in northern Norway had sent representatives to pay tribute to their chief. Chief! Marin was stunned at first, then he remembered Michael's strange document. It seems that I really am the chief of the Sami people in the Arctic Circle. So, Marin reluctantly put down the ice cream spoon, wiped his mouth, went to the vestibule of the palace, and met with the Sami envoy. Then, in the vestibule of the palace, Marin saw a bearded Sami man wearing red animal skin clothes and a red cap. Seeing the other person's look, Marin blurted out, "Santa Claus." Although the other person was not wearing winter clothes, the full set of red leather clothes, plus the little red hat that looked like Santa Claus's hat, and the gray beard on his face, he really looked like Santa Claus. The most important thing is that this guy leads 9 reindeer. However, the legend of Santa Claus spread throughout the Western world with the rise of fairy tales in the 19th century. But Marin remembered that in fairy tales, Santa Claus seemed to come from northern Norway and Sweden. Perhaps, those fairy tales were made up based on the prototype of the Sami people. "Hello, respected chief, I am your loyal servant Klaus." The bearded Sami old man said humbly in not very proficient German. Klaus. It's really the name of Santa Claus. Marin wanted to laugh. After holding back his smile, Marin put on a majestic face and asked, "Hello, Klaus, where are you from? And how do you speak German?" "Dear chief, I come from a small seaside fishing village called Narvik in northern Norway. As for my German, I learned it from a priest who came to preach there." Narvik? Marin was stunned. Isn't that the port for the export of Kiruna iron ore in Sweden in later generations? At this time, there was no city there. However, it is reasonable for this guy to say that it is a small fishing village. After all, the construction of the port will definitely be built in places where there are people. Moreover, Narvik is indeed a fishing port, and it is an ice-free port. Claus's words suddenly gave Marin the idea of building a city in Narvik in advance. At the same time, the idea of developing the Kiruna iron ore has also taken root in Marin's heart. However, from Kiruna to Narvik, it seems that you have to cross the mountains of the Scandinavian peninsula. However, the fact that later generations were able to build a railway from Kiruna to Narvik at the end of the 19th century proves that this road is not so rugged. At least, in the northern part of the Scandinavian mountains, there must be a mountain pass that can be passed through, connecting Kiruna to Narvik. However, there are roads, and it is by no means a simple matter to build a road from Kiruna to Narvik. Even if it is a cement road, the difficulty is against the sky. But if there is no road, how to transport the high-grade iron ore from Kiruna? Marin remembered a documentary he had seen later, Train on the Edge of Europe, from Kiruna to Narvik. In the documentary, the scene of a train carrying 50 carriages of iron ore running on a desolate snowy wasteland left a deep impression on Marin. Wasteland, snow, I really want to use a sled to transport ore. The Scandinavian mountains in the polar region have complex terrain and difficult road construction. However, during the period when the mountains were closed by heavy snow, sleds can move freely. Because the thick snow covered the ruggedness of the road, the sleds can move freely on the snow, overcoming some terrain problems. In an instant, Marin made a decision, to develop the Kiruna iron ore, mine ore in summer, accumulate it, and then transport it to Narvik by sled in winter, and ship it. The reason for choosing summer mining and winter transportation is that the land is frozen in winter, and the ore cannot be dug, so it can only be dug in summer. However, transportation is inconvenient in summer because of the rugged mountain roads. Therefore, the best solution is to mine in the summer and store the iron ore. Then, in winter, when the mountains are blocked by heavy snow, the ore can be transported out by sled. It is only 166 kilometers from Kiruna to Narvik. It is not difficult to transport ore by sled. Moreover, the grade of iron ore in Kiruna is very high, up to more than 70%. In fact, the difference between transporting such iron ore and transporting iron ingots is not very big. Originally, Marin planned to introduce Era from Siberia to engage in dog sledding. However, Claus told Marin that it was completely unnecessary. Because the Sami people generally use reindeer to pull sleds. Claus said that dog sledding generally requires several dogs, while reindeer sledding can be done with just one. Moreover, reindeer are easier to feed than sled dogs. Because reindeer are vegetarians and eat foods such as moss, leaves and grass. And the dogs pulling dog sleds are carnivores. Therefore, in terms of economic cost, reindeer sledding is better. A sled pulled by a reindeer can easily carry 2 people. If you need to pull ore, you can use 2 more reindeers. After solving this problem, Marin was happy. So he asked Claus why he came. So Claus told Marin the reason for coming to Marin. It turns out that the Sami people not only domesticate reindeer, but also fish on the seaside. The fishing village of Narvik is a village that combines fishing and reindeer breeding. However, after Denmark ceded the land in the Arctic Circle to Marin last year, the Norwegian authorities did not care much about the Sami area. Because, in the eyes of the Norwegians, the Sami area has no oil and water, and it is still a burden, so it is better to throw it to Marin. Especially Norwegian fishermen, they think that the Sami fishermen are competing with them for the salted fish business. Therefore, after the official announcement that the Arctic Circle area was ceded to Marin, the Norwegian fishermen agreed with both hands. Moreover, they also put pressure on the Norwegian officials, asking the Norwegian authorities not to sell salt to the Sami people anymore, nor to buy the salted fish made by the Sami people. In this way, Norwegian fishermen have fewer competitors. Under pressure from Norwegian fishermen, the Kingdom of Norway, which has already ceded the Arctic Circle, finally stopped supplying salt to the Sami people and stopped purchasing their salted fish at the beginning of this year. In this way, the Sami people in the Arctic Circle suffered a heavy blow. Especially the Sami people on the North Sea coast of Norway, because they could not introduce salt, the fish they caught could not be pickled into salted fish, and they themselves lacked salt intake, so life became difficult. So the Sami people sent people to Oslo, the capital of the Kingdom of Norway, to petition and request the restoration of the trade of salt and salted fish. However, Oslo responded that the Sami area had been ceded to Marin, and this problem should be solved by Marin. So, Claus, who knew German, took a fishing boat as a representative of the Sami people and came to East Frisia to ask for help from the great chief Marin, and also offered 9 reindeer as a tribute. What the Sami people lacked most was salt and the sale of salted fish. It happened that Marin needed to develop the Kiruna iron ore. Moreover, East Frisia is also rich in salt, which means building a few more salt boiling pots. So, as the great chief of the Sami people, Marin agreed to provide the Sami people with a large amount of salt. Of course, they were exchanged for salted fish or reindeer fur. Klaus was naturally delighted to hear that Marin could provide a large amount of salt. As for exchanging reindeer fur for salt, that was only natural. Moreover, the Sami people were not short of reindeer leather. As a result, Great Chief Marin and the representative of the Sami people, Klaus, quickly reached a win-win trade agreement. Marin would send people to build a trading post in Narvik to sell salt to the Sami people, purchase reindeer fur and bacon, as well as salted fish and other commodities. As for the development of Kiruna's iron ore and the transportation of iron ore, Klaus said, as long as the Great Chief was willing to trade with them, these were all trivial matters, and the Sami people would definitely support them with all their strength. Chapter 293 Eunuch Mao. After reaching an agreement with the Sami people, Marin arranged 2 merchant ships of about 180 tons, merchant ships of more than 200 tons were arranged to transport ewes to Western Sahara to find boyfriends, carrying salt, building materials and other supplies, and planned to build a trading port in the fishing village of Narvik. In the future, Marin planned to use it as a trade center with the Sami people. Claus, who looks like Santa Claus, was very happy to drive 3 small fishing boats with the Sami fishermen to guide Marin's 2 merchant ships. For the Sami people who live in the polar regions and lack supplies, good days are coming. Because Marin promised that in addition to salt, he would also provide the Sami people with various living supplies, including cloth, needles and thread, and hunting bows and knives. And these are what the Sami people are in urgent need of. The Norwegians and Danes do not regard the Sami people as human beings, but only as barbarians. Therefore, it is very difficult for the Sami people to be suppliers of supplies. Every year, the Danes would only send 1 or 2 ships, loaded with salt, which the Sami people needed most, to the Sami area, selling it at a high price and purchasing reindeer fur and other materials at a low price, to exploit the Sami people. As for the bows and hunting knives that the Sami people urgently needed for hunting, the Norwegians did not give them at all. Because they were afraid that the Sami people would threaten their rule after they had weapons. But Marin was not worried about this. Why? The Sami people expected him to provide them with supplies. Even if they had weapons, would they dare to use them on their own men? Even if the Sami people were upset and wanted to rob as bandits, they could only go to the south to rob the Norwegians, and it was impossible for them to cross the sea to East Frisia to rob. Therefore, Marin was very relieved to buy weapons for the Sami people. Moreover, the Sami people did need as many weapons as possible. Because in their living area, there were dangerous creatures such as grizzly bears, polar bears and snow wolves. If the Sami people did not have weapons, they could only watch these creatures wreak havoc and hide in houses for defense. However, with sufficient and sophisticated weapons, these threatening guys can be hunted. In that way, the reindeer domesticated by the Sami people will not be preyed upon by wolves. After Klaus left, Marin was inspired and told little Caesar a fairy tale about Santa Claus. Little Caesar, who was already very fluent in speaking, was fascinated by the story. In fact, not to mention little Caesar, even Angela and Felice were attracted by the fairy tale. Only little Robert, because he was too young, didn't understand what Marin was talking about. I heard that Santa Claus drove a cart pulled by 9 reindeer to give gifts to children. Little Caesar happened to see the 9 reindeer tied in the courtyard of the palace, so he strongly asked Marin to use the 9 reindeer to pull the cart. Marin took a look and found that these 9 reindeer seemed to be castrated male deer, and they were also very tame, and seemed to be used to pull carts. Because, on these 9 reindeers, there are still reins and shoulder harnesses for pulling carts. However, the horsepower of 9 reindeer pulling carts together is too great, so Marin used one of them to make a small reindeer cart and put Caesar on it to play, which made Caesar very happy. A few days later, Art's fleet transporting Maumei brought back another batch of Maumei. This is the last batch of Maumei captured by the Principality of Ryazan. According to Art, Crimean monk Gilay Khan has been preparing for war and waiting for the autumn harvest to rob another wave of Maumei. At that time, Maumei and food will be robbed together. Marin rolled his eyes when he heard it is indeed a bandit country, and they have gained experience in robbing. After the autumn harvest, it is the time when there is the most food in the countryside. As long as you go to the countryside before those nobles transport the food into the city, there will definitely be a lot of food. Moreover, Marin does not think that, except for those sturdy castles, any Russian village can withstand the attack of the Crimean Tatar cavalry. By the way, Your Excellency Duke, Genghis Khan asked me to ask you, are those castrated Ryazan men still useful now? Marin didn't understand, but still sent people to check what happened to the first batch of unlucky Russians who came with the ship. Art explained, it's like this, sir. There are problems with the sales of the 10,000 strong men captured by Genghis Khan. Before, I taught them the method of disinfection. Now, those 10,000 strong men have been castrated, but the Crimeans are very excited that 9,900 of them survived. Then, they promoted the castrated Ryazan people everywhere, but they encountered problems. Encountered problems? What problems? Are there any defects in those Ryazan men? That's not the case. It's like this. The main sales destination of Crimean slaves is Ottoman Turkey. It's just that it's very unfortunate. Last year, Omani pirates in the Arab region, the ancient Omanis were very powerful and often invaded East Africa, captured thousands of strong black slaves in East Africa, and they were all castrated. Therefore, the Ottoman Turkish male slave market was saturated last year. Therefore, these 9,900 Ryazan male slaves of the Crimean Khanate were suddenly unsaleable. This is really unlucky. Then, Genghis Khan wants to sell the unsaleable goods to me. It seems so. At this time, the men who were sent by Marin to investigate the whereabouts of the castrated Russians came back. Sir, we have investigated clearly. Those Russian slaves are working as porters at the granary in the north of the city, responsible for loading and unloading grain. In the past few months, these slaves have been very honest and hardworking. Although they have a big appetite, they work hard and never slack off. At night, they go to bed as soon as it gets dark and never make trouble. Marin's mouth twitched. They were all castrated, what else could they do at night? Whether it was looking for a woman or a gay friend, he was powerless. So, I can only sleep as soon as it gets dark. So, these Russian slaves are quite honest and hardworking. Yes, sir. Marin turned to ask Art, what do you say in Crimea? In Crimea? I heard from those Tatars that in the past few months, except for the period of recuperation after being castrated, the 9,900 Russian slaves have been helping Munkagayar Khan build the palace. It seems that those slaves are very honest. After all, they are serfs of the Ryazan Principality. Serfs. It's easy to find one. It just so happens that the North Minster area needs serfs to reclaim wasteland. Then buy them and use them to reclaim wasteland and farm. Marin said happily. No, sir, this will affect your reputation. At this time, Machiavelli, Marin's secretary next to him, suddenly objected. Niccolo, what do you mean? Marin was a little surprised. However, he still respected Machiavelli's opinion. After all, he is a big shot. Sir, have you forgotten? The Holy See does not allow the slave trade. It seems so. So, if you buy back those 9,000 slaves, you will be questioned by other nobles, and it will also cause displeasure to the Holy See. Marin thought about it. Indeed, it seemed a bit disrespectful to the Holy See to do so. Although the Pope is his father-in-law, the Pope's father-in-law can't stop the gossip. Then don't buy it. Marin said with some regret. That's not necessary, sir, don't you have several colonies in the savage continent? Why don't you send these Russian slaves who were born as serfs to the savage continent colonies as serfs? Anyway, no one will see the Russian slaves transported to the savage continent. Marin thought, it's true. In fact, Marin had planned to do so before. However, now that North Minster is being reclaimed, a large number of people are urgently needed, so he was foolish enough to want to transport the more than 9,000 Mauzi eunuchs back to his homeland to participate in the reclamation. However, in order to avoid becoming the target of public criticism, Marin decided to do as Machiavelli said, buy the more than 9,000 Mao eunuchs, and then send them to North America as serfs. After all, 9,000 Mao eunuchs with farming experience can definitely reclaim a large amount of arable land. Mauzi men are called Mauzi, and Mauzi women are called Maomei. As for castrated Mauzi, they are called Mao eunuchs. Chapter 294, Copper from the Phelan Copper Mine. Long before the war between the Quadruple Alliance and Denmark broke out, Marin had the idea of developing the Phelan Copper Mine. At the end of the war, Marin and Old Sten Sture signed an agreement that Marin would provide manpower and money to develop the copper mine. The Swedish official assisted Marin's people to build a road from Phelan to the seaport of Gavel, dozens of kilometers away. The income from the copper mine was divided in half between Marin and the Swedish official. In addition, the copper mine did not pay taxes, and the mining tax was counted as half of the income. After the war, Marin returned to East Frisia, and then sent people to the copper-producing areas of Austria and Bohemia to recruit hundreds of experienced mining engineers, miners, and smelting engineers, etc., plus Marin's imitation of the new furnace similar to the simple blast furnace left over from the great steelmaking period in the back mountain of his hometown in his previous life, and went to Phelan to develop the copper mine. In addition, Marin also sent dozens of road engineers to find ways to build a road from Fehling to Gavel. After all, after the copper ore is mined and smelted, it still needs to be transported out. Otherwise, it can only be piled up in the mountain. After the development team arrived at the Fehling copper mine, they quickly conducted exploration. When the exploration report came out, everyone was shocked. Why? For ordinary copper mines, the copper content of the ore can reach more than 1%. The copper content of the ore of the Fehling copper mine is as high as 3%, 7%. Moreover, the reserves of the ore are very large and difficult to estimate. When Marin got this report, he was also shocked. Why? In later generations, the highest grade Spanish CLC copper mine has a grade of only 5%. The grade of the Fehling copper mine is so high, and the output is so large, no wonder it can support Gustav II's domination of the European continent. It is said that in the 17th century, the annual output of copper in the Fehling copper mine was as high as 3,600 tons. What is the concept? If we follow the current silver-copper price ratio, 3,600 divided by 15 is 240 tons. Divided by 12 according to the gold-silver exchange rate, that is 20 tons, gold, equivalent to 5.61 million gold coins. Even in the 17th century, the silver-copper exchange rate fell to between 150 and 80. Let's assume that the copper price fell 5 times, and 3,600 tons of copper were worth more than 1 million gold coins. No wonder Gustav II was able to feed an army of 10,000 or 20,000 and dominate the European continent. If it were produced with Sweden's barren land, it would be difficult to feed an army of 20,000, let alone 20,000. You know, 2/3 of Gustav II's army were musketeers, and there were hundreds of artillery pieces. When such an army fought, the consumption of gunpowder was amazing. So, although Guiri had less than 20,000 troops, his expenses could match those of tens of thousands of cold weapon troops. The blast furnace that Marin sent to the Fehling copper mine could only process 5 tons of copper ore per day. However, the copper produced by these 5 tons of copper ore was as high as 150 to 350 kilograms. Generally speaking, an average of 250 kilograms of copper, or 551 pounds, can be produced every day. In the first few months, new mines and buildings had to be built in the Fehling area, as well as roads and charcoal resources. In the past 2 months, the copper mine has been able to produce 250 kilograms of copper ingots every day. However, according to the report of the engineers of the paving team, Marin learned that the mountain road from Fehling to Gavel might not be repaired within 3 years. Therefore, the paving team gave another solution to the problem, using mules to carry. From Fehling to Gavel, there are many mountain roads, which are not suitable for carriages, but mules are no problem. The advantage of mules is that they can walk on mountain roads, and they can carry 300 or 400 kilograms of things. Therefore, the engineers of the paving team suggested introducing a batch of mules to carry the copper ingots smelted by the Fehling copper mine from Fehling to Gavel. Therefore, Kohler, who was responsible for following up the entire project, allocated funds to buy 100 mules and sent them to carry copper ingots. In this way, 33,000 pounds of copper produced in the past 2 months were carried out by 100 mules, each mule carrying 300 pounds, for a total of 30,000 pounds. After arriving in Gavel, the transport ship arranged by Kohler loaded 30,000 pounds of copper ingots. However, when heading south, it stopped in Stockholm and unloaded 15,000 pounds of copper ingots, which were handed over to old Sten Sture as dividends. When old Sten Sture heard that this was only 2 months of dividends, he fainted with joy. Fortunately, Marin sent a court doctor from the Golden Horde to the side, who quickly pinched the Renjong and rescued the old guy. Otherwise, old Sten Sture might have been overjoyed. At this time, Sweden had just gained independence and had a lot of work to do. However, the Swedish court had no money and could do nothing. And these 15,000 pounds of copper ingots could be exchanged for 1,000 pounds of silver. How could old Sten Sture not be happy? Moreover, this is only the income for 2 months. In a year, wouldn't it be a super high income of 90,000 pounds of copper, 6,000 pounds of silver? After careful consideration, the long-term vision of old Sten Sture decided that the government would pay for and send people to repair the road from Fehling to Gavel so that carriages could pass. As long as the output of the Fehling copper mine increases, the Swedish court will get more dividends. After leaving Sweden, the copper ship continued to go south, then passed through the Øresund Strait controlled by Lübeck and Hamburg, entered the North Sea, and returned to East Frisia. Then, 15,000 pounds of copper ingots were transported to Auric, asking Marin to deal with them. Seeing the piles of copper ingots in front of him, Marin was also dazzled. When he learned that if there were more blast furnaces, the output would increase, Marin immediately ordered the blacksmiths to build another 9 blast furnaces, disassemble them and send them to Failing for reassembly. In this way, as long as the miners' mining volume and the supply of charcoal can keep up, the copper output will increase tenfold. Moreover, the miners and charcoal problems can be solved with the help of Old Sten Sture. Sweden has a sufficient population of 800,000 people, so it is not a problem for Old Sten Sture to get more miners. As for charcoal, Sweden lacks everything except wood. At that time, just cut more trees to smelt charcoal. As for Sweden's environmental protection, Marin doesn't care, it's not his territory. If the output is increased tenfold, then the copper mine will produce 150,000 pounds of copper in 2 months, worth 10,000 pounds of silver. Even if 30% to 40% of the cost is deducted, there will be a profit of 6,000 to 7,000 pounds of silver. In this way, the annual income can reach the level of 30,000 to 40,000 pounds of silver. The only concern is whether the Swedish officials will be jealous and take back the French copper mine. However, in Marin's view, the other party should not be so short-sighted. At least, Old Sten Sture will not be so stupid. You know, if it weren't for Marin's army to intimidate Denmark, Sweden's strength might not be able to withstand Denmark's attack. Therefore, Old Sten Sture would not do such a foolish thing as to betray his allies. Without his allies, Sweden might be reannexed by Denmark. Historically, after the death of Old Sten Sture, Denmark quickly reannexed Sweden. Later, it was not until the rise of the Vasa family that Sweden regained its independence. Sell all these copper ingots. Marin suddenly waved his hand and asked Kohler's men to sell the 15,000 pounds of copper ingots and exchange them for silver. The reason for this decision is that Marin knows that the price of copper is not static. As the output of the French copper mine increases, the price of copper will slowly fall. Therefore, it is better to sell all the early copper and exchange it for silver. Otherwise, if these copper ingots are kept, the price will slowly fall as the output increases. Chapter 295 The First Batch of Slaves. In Lisbon, Portugal, Enka was drinking in a Portuguese tavern while looking for his target. He was arranged by Marin to Kohler to come to Portugal to find a supplier of black slaves. Panama needed a lot of labor to build a road to the Pacific Ocean. Marin did not want to provoke the fierce Panamanians in the local jungle for the time being, so buying black slaves became the first choice. After all, black people are used to living in the rainforest, at least they are much more adaptable to the climate of Panama than white people. Moreover, black people are strong, and it is perfect to cut trees and open roads. At present, the country with the deepest connection with Africa is only Portugal. Although Spain is also in Africa, it is only in North Africa and only deals with Arabs and Berbers. The only European country that deals with African blacks is Portugal. Therefore, if you want to buy black slaves, you can only find the Portuguese. However, the Portuguese have not yet been involved in the slave trade. Why? Because the appearance of Marin changed history, so that Portugal did not discover and develop Brazil in 1500 as it did in the original history. And the development of Brazil was the original driving force for Portugal to sell black slaves. Therefore, the Portuguese have not started to sell black slaves on a large scale. However, the fact that the Portuguese have not started to sell black slaves does not mean that they do not have channels to sell black slaves. You know, the sale of black slaves was not initiated by Europeans at all, but was actively promoted to Portuguese merchants by the local chiefs of black people. Just like the piglets and Chinese workers in the 19th century, if there were no bastards in China, could the foreigners come to kidnap people? In the final analysis, if there were no evildoers in the country, outsiders could not intervene. However, this point is never mentioned in those politically correct history books, and they just blame the colonizers. Imagine, if there were no traders like Wu Sangue and Hong Qingqiu, would the Qing dynasty have had the opportunity to enter the pass? Historically, people have different attitudes towards the Yuan dynasty and the Qing dynasty. Why? Because the Yuan dynasty had the ability to crush the world at that time, and the Southern Song dynasty was weak, so it was not surprising that it was destroyed. The Qing dynasty did not have such power at that time. If it were not for the traders leading the way, there would be no pigtail dynasty at all. Therefore, many Ming fans in later generations regretted the demise of the Ming dynasty. However, not many people regretted the demise of the Southern Song dynasty. Because the Southern Song dynasty could not be helped up at all. If it was not for cheating, there was no possibility of being spared. Even the Northern Song dynasty was not enough to fight against the Mongolian cavalry at its peak. Similarly, if it were not for the active promotion of those African chiefs, the Portuguese would not have thought of selling black slaves. Therefore, fortresses are often broken from the inside. If a country is not united, then it is not far from destruction. Of course, the Portuguese are not good people either. After these guys tasted the sweetness of selling black slaves, and Brazil's development just needed a lot of labor, they started to sell black slaves, encouraging African chiefs to stab each other with spears, and then get black slaves, and exchange them with these Portuguese for pitiful goods, such as glass beads and other useless things. However, at this stage, because there is no development of Brazil, Portugal has no demand for selling black slaves. In addition, the Vatican prohibits the sale of slaves, so it is still very difficult to find a businessman who sells black slaves. So, these days, Enka has been hanging out in the major taverns in Lisbon, looking for local brokers and asking about black slaves. Although the Portuguese have not yet started to actively sell black slaves. However, Marin is sure that in the process of trade between the Portuguese and the African chiefs, there must be poor African chiefs who have recommended black slaves to Portuguese merchants. Therefore, Enka's task is to find out which Portuguese Chamber of Commerce has channels to buy black slaves. Therefore, he needs to find brokers and find those ship owners who often go to the West African coast for trade, and ask them about the source of black slaves. However, after meeting with several ship owners in a row, Enka did not get good news. Those ship owners went to exchange gold, sand and ivory with the African chiefs. Probably the situation on the customer side was stable, and no news of black slaves was heard. However, Enka did not give up. Because there are at least hundreds of Portuguese merchant ships on the west coast of Africa, and there is no news about several ships, then ask again. Hard work pays off. With the help of brokers, Enka met a captain named Oquero. This man was a servant of Jorge de Rencaster, the Duke of Coimbra of Portugal, and was responsible for the trade of Elmina, a colony on the coast of Ghana. The Duke of Coimbra had a great background. Jorge de Rencaster was the illegitimate son of the previous king of Portugal, John II. After the legitimate crown prince Alfonso accidentally fell off his horse and died, John II once wanted to ask the Pope to make his illegitimate son Jorge de Rencaster the legitimate heir to the king. However, the nobles who were hostile to John II also spent more money on bribes than John II. In the end, the then Pope Alexander VI ruled that Jorge de Rencaster had no legal right of succession. In desperation, John II could only pass the throne to Manuel I. However, Manuel I was required to confer Jorge de Rencaster as the Duke of Coimbra and obtain the management rights of the Madeira Islands. In this way, Jorge de Rencaster, who owned the Principality of Coimbra and the Madeira Islands, became the most powerful nobleman under the rule of Manuel I. Of course, Jorge de Rencaster's influence not only covered the Principality of Coimbra and the Madeira Islands. In the Portuguese colonial outpost of Emilina in Ghana, Gold Coast, Jorge de Rencaster also had ships going there to exchange gold, sand and ivory with ordinary goods from the non-chiefs. And Oquero was the captain of one of the merchant ships under Jorge de Rencaster that often went to the Gold Coast for trade. Oquero recalled that when he was trading in Emilina, there were indeed a few poor non-chiefs who wanted to use black slaves to replace gold and ivory to trade with him, but he refused. After being rejected by Oquero, those poor non-chiefs were still very angry and tried to let Oquero eat a spear in public. However, under the supervision of Emilina's Portuguese colonial army, those non-chiefs gave up the idea of giving Oquero a spear. So, you want to buy black slaves? But, I remember that the Holy See does not allow the slave trade. Oquero asked doubtfully. That's in Europe. We want black slaves to develop the wild continent. Enka said indifferently. He knew that the current pope favored their duke, and selling a few black slaves was nothing. That's right, it's not difficult for me to get black slaves for you. However, I can't make the decision on this matter. I have to ask the Duke. Then wait for good news, Captain Oquero. After saying that, a small bag of gold coins fell into Captain Oquero's sleeve without anyone noticing. And Captain Oquero also hid the gold coins skillfully. The next day, the Duke of Coimbra's instructions came down: the slave trade is allowed, but the buyer needs to send a ship to the Madeira Islands to pick it up. After all, black slaves cannot appear in Europe, so as not to be caught by the Holy See. Therefore, the Duke of Coimbra, Jorge de Rencaster, meant to conduct a secret transaction in his territory, Madeira Islands. Enka naturally had no objection to this. It just so happened that the ship to America also had to pass through Madeira Islands. However, in terms of price, Coimbra opened its mouth and offered 100 gold coins per slave, equivalent to £25. In this era when the price revolution had not yet broken out, such a price was considered high. Only a rich man would be willing to spend such a high price to buy black slaves. Because Europeans had no demand for black slaves at that time, the price of black slaves could not go up. You only need to spend a few gold coins worth of goods to exchange for a black slave. Even in the early 19th century, when the price of black slaves was the most expensive, and after the price revolution, in Mozambique, Africa, Portuguese merchants could get strong slaves from worldly African chiefs by spending at most a dozen or 20 pounds worth of goods. Here, the worldly chiefs will no longer be cheated of gold and ivory by the colonists with a few glass beads. Because they have traded with European colonists many times, they also know a little about the trade market. A few gold coins cost goods, and the black slaves exchanged want to sell 100 gold coins. Obviously, no one wants to be such a rich man. So Enka asked for a bargain. After several rounds of bargaining, the price of black slaves was set at 40 gold coins each. In fact, this has allowed the Duke of Coimbra to have 7 or 8 times the profit. In addition, Jorge de Rencaster, Duke of Coimbra, set the source of black slaves on São Tomé Island. There, Jorge de Rencaster also had his own power. Moreover, there were already sugarcane plantations on São Tomé Island. The labor force was the black slaves bought at low prices from Congo and Gabon. As early as 1499, the Portuguese opened up several sugarcane plantations on São Tomé Island. Jorge de Rencaster, Duke of Coimbra, also had his own sugarcane plantation on São Tomé Island. This was unknown to Marin, who claimed to be the historical emperor. Marin always thought that Portugal would not start the slave trade until it opened up Brazil. In fact, on São Tomé Island off the coast of Gabon, the Portuguese began using black slaves to open up sugarcane plantations in 1499. On São Tomé Island, the purchase price of a black slave was just an ordinary commodity worth 2 or 3 gold coins, which was very cheap. In fact, if it were not for Marin's intervention in history. In 1501, the Spanish colony of Hispaniola should have imported the first batch of black slaves from Portugal. However, the two kings of Spain were seduced by Marin to go to India to compete with Portugal for the benefits of the spice trade. As a result, the development of Hispaniola was suspended. Coupled with the syphilis incident that occurred later, Hispaniola is now almost abandoned by the Spanish. Enka was satisfied, but he didn't know that the Duke of Coimbra, Jorge de Rencaster, was laughing. For a rich man like Enka, Jorge de Rencaster thought the more the better. If the death of black slaves during the transportation of black slaves is not considered, the slave trade of 40 gold coins per slave can almost bring 10 times the profit to the Duke of Coimbra. Even if half of them died during transportation, there are still 5 or 6 times the huge profits. However, Enka was lucky to buy black slaves in Portugal this time. Because he happened to meet the people of Jorge de Rencaster, the Duke of Coimbra. If you meet someone from Manuel I, no one will sell to him even if they are willing to pay. Why? Because of Marin, Columbus helped Spain explore the real India, causing Spain to compete with Portugal for business now. How can the Portuguese not hate Marin? Enka, as a representative of Marin, would not be noticed by ordinary Portuguese nobles. However, the Duke of Coimbra is an exception. Because he and Manuel I are actually political enemies. After all, the two of them competed for the throne of Portugal. Moreover, the huge profits from the Indian spice trade are in the hands of Manuel I's faction and have nothing to do with Jorge, the Duke of Coimbra. Even Marin ruined Manuel I's good deeds and aroused the favor of the Duke of Coimbra. Therefore, when he heard that Marin wanted to buy black slaves and the price he offered was high enough, the Duke of Coimbra was willing to trade with him. Otherwise, if it were a noble from Manuel I's faction, they would probably send people to beat Enka out with sticks, without giving him a chance to speak. In this way, Enka reached a trade agreement with the Duke of Coimbra on behalf of Marin, and ordered 200 people in the first batch at the price of 40 gold coins per strong and honest black slave, with a total contract price of 8,000 gold coins. After signing the contract, the Duke of Coimbra, Jorge de Rencaster, sent a ship south to São Tomé Island to prepare black slaves. Enka, on the other hand, went north to return home, reported the results to Marin, prepared the ship to receive the first batch of black slaves, and prepared to pay the relevant expenses. Chapter 296, Palace Ball. After a period of training, the General Inspector is almost ready to go. However, before leaving, Marin held a court ball for the whole territory, inviting nobles and noble ladies in the territory to attend. Since Albert chose to be the governor of the American colonies, it became an important thing to choose a local noble lady as his fiancée. Of course, in addition to Albert, Marin also has Schwartz, the old man. Schwartz is 30 years old and still single. The main reason is that there are no suitable noble ladies in East Frisia. After all, in order to eliminate future troubles, Marin killed most of the East Frisian nobles, leaving only a few older nobles such as Geoffrey. Unfortunately, Geoffrey only has a fat daughter, and he is still relying on Kohler. Therefore, it seems difficult for Schwartz to find a beautiful noble lady. So, Marin thought of the nobles in the earldom of Oldenburg and the duchy of Schleswig. Marin occupied these two countries and did not kill the nobles of these two countries. As long as they don't raise troops to resist, Marin will at most deprive them of the right to manage their manors, but the income of the manor will still be distributed according to the previous standards. Therefore, the quality of life of those nobles has not declined at all. At present, Las Vegas has not been fully built, and those nobles, whether they are valued or not, basically still live in their own country. So, Marin took this opportunity to issue a call a month ago, inviting the nobles in the country to bring their daughters. Of course, mainly baron titles. There are a total of 27 barons of all sizes in the two countries, whether they have fiefs or not. Except for the two baron families who are loyal to the Oldenburg family, the other 25 families have all been invited. Marin made no secret of the fact that this was for Schwartz and Albert to choose their fiancées. And hinted that those marginalized families, if they have daughters or nieces, will return to the ruling class if they are favored by Schwartz or Albert. After all, whether it is Schwartz, who holds military power, or his younger brother Albert, they are enough to protect them. As for the Munster area, Marin couldn't find any traditional noble ladies. Why? Because Munster is a bishop's country, and it's full of priests. No matter how powerful the priests are, they have no legitimate children. Could it be that the priests are asked to bring their illegitimate daughters here? As for the 80 church knights, not only do they not meet the standards of barons. Even if they do, Marin won't invite them. Because he just deprived them of their land in the North Munster area. Therefore, if you want to find traditional nobles, you can only go to the two secular principalities with a long history, the earldom of Oldenburg and the duchy of Schleswig. As soon as the news came out, it immediately attracted the attention of the nobles of the earldom of Oldenburg and the duchy of Schleswig. Especially those baron families who had lost power, almost regarded this ball as a life-saving straw. So, the daughters or nieces of the patriarchs of these families, as long as they were not married, were all pulled out, and they rode in the shock-absorbing carriage made by Marin to Auric. Since he thought of covering the city gate with tinplate, Marin fortunately tinned the shock-absorbing springs used in the shock-absorbing carriages and turned them into tinplate springs. In this way, the rust-proof performance of the springs is much better and the service life is greatly extended. Although Marin deprived 16 of the 25 barons of their power, he did not treat them unfairly. The good food and drink were in limited supply. Shock-absorbing carriages were also given 2 to each family. This time, Auric held a national ball for senior nobles for the first time, and all 25 traditional baron families were blown out. Even the only 3 earl families in the Duchy of Schleswig sent people to participate. Of course, the earls of the Duchy of Schleswig are not real princes, but honorary ones. Their territories are not much larger than those of barons. Moreover, one family was even entrusted. Moreover, among the 3 earl families in the Duchy of Schleswig, there is the Upson family of former Danish Prime Minister Mikkel Upson. This time, when he heard that Marin was going to choose wives for Schwartz and Albert, he, as the Prime Minister of the Duchy of Schleswig, did not hesitate to bring his youngest daughter Irene to attend the ball. As for the safety of the Duchy of Schleswig, it was naturally handed over to Wolf Esprand. Mikkel knew that he was old and would not live for many years. If he was alive, he could take advantage of Marin's current lack of political talents and serve as the Prime Minister of the Duchy of Schleswig for a few years. But once he died, his 2 sons would have average talents. Therefore, the Upson family also needed strong in-laws and allies. Schwartz and Albert, who chose wives this time, were both strong people who could protect the Upson family. Therefore, Mikkel did not hesitate to bring his most outstanding youngest daughter Irene to Auric to attend the ball. Marin also took great pains for this ball. In order to have a suitable song, Marin directly copied Beethoven's world-famous song, To Elise. However, the cunning Marin changed the name of To Alice to Angela, which made Angela very happy and she became more active at night. Then, Marin's creativity flowed like a spring, and shamelessly copied the famous waltz, The Blue Danube. Of course, when copying, Leonardo da Vinci was conscripted again. Marin was responsible for humming, and Leonardo da Vinci used the simple 5-line score taught by Marin to listen and restore the score. Then, 2 world-famous songs came out, both of which are very suitable for dubbing for aristocratic balls. Moreover, the song, To Angela, To Alice, also earned Marin the title of Passionate Duke and became the male protagonist in the love story. Although there is no piano performance, Leonardo da Vinci is a great musician. After a slight change, he used some existing instruments to restore the style of the world-famous songs to a large extent. When the banquet ended and the dance began, when the moving music sounded in the palace hall, many people even forgot to dance and asked, "What song is this?" The first song was naturally, To Angela, which Marin created for Angela, shameless. The wonderful music made people intoxicated. And with the explanation of the busybody, when everyone learned that this was a song, created by Marin specifically for Angela, many noble girls looked at Angela with envy and jealousy. Indeed, Marin not only knew how to fight, conquered a large territory, and became a great noble, but also had so many talents. A military general actually created famous songs, and let others live. The two world-famous songs were played several times, and everyone came back from the sound of nature, and then started dancing. This time, the purpose of the dance was clear. Therefore, dozens of noble ladies present surrounded Schwartz and Albert and invited them to dance. Albert was better, because he was well-mannered and well-educated by Lady Mary. Schwartz was shy like a big boy. When dancing, he was even more shy than a girl, and he didn't know where to put his hands. The final result surprised Marin. Why? Because Schwartz and Albert both liked Michael's youngest daughter, 18-year-old Irene Upson. However, Michael took the initiative to help his daughter choose Schwartz as her husband, and Irene agreed. Why? This is the sophistication of Michael. Michael knew that although Albert was a prince, he was just a prince without the right of inheritance. Even if Caesar died young, Angela did not give birth to other heirs, and it would not be the turn of Albert, the youngest, to inherit the throne. Therefore, Albert was not a practical prince. Schwartz is different. He is Marin's #1 confidant and the man with the most power under Marin. Following Schwartz, the Upson family will never be bad. Therefore, Michael decisively chose Schwartz as his son-in-law. Albert was a little disappointed, but he didn't have to marry Irene. Because he actually had high hopes for another girl named Maria Gust, the daughter of a baron family that had lost power in the earldom of Oldenburg. The reason why Irene was chosen before was mainly because Irene's father Michael was the palace minister of the Duchy of Schleswig and a count. This identity gave Irene a lot of points. However, Michael chose Schwartz, and Albert had no choice. So Albert chose Maria Gust. When Baron George of Gust heard that his daughter was favored by Prince Albert, he jumped for joy on the spot. Because, as long as their family holds Albert's thigh, they will no longer be marginalized. After a dance, Marin achieved his goal and was very happy. Old Hoffman and Lady Mary were also very happy. Although Miss Gust was only from a baronial family, she was beautiful, almost catching up with Angela. Moreover, her upbringing and knowledge were also very good. Moreover, Kohler's intelligence organization had also investigated the Gust family and found that this family was not close to the Oldenburg family and could be used. As for Miss Gust, she had a good reputation since she was a child and had no romantic affairs. After the ball, the Hoffman family and the Gust family held a grand engagement ceremony, and then Albert took a boat to the Twin Islands to serve as governor. Anyway, Albert was only 20 years old and Miss Gust was less than 17 years old. Marin planned to hold a wedding for them in 2 years. Chapter 297 George's defeat. Because of Albert's relationship, Marin decided to let the Gust family go and return the Gust family's fiefdom to them for management. However, the supply of fertilizer did not decrease. In this way, the Gust family's income will increase 7 or 8 times, becoming a veritable wealthy noble. After all, the output of 1 acre of rye, minus nearly 100 pounds of seed input, serfs' food and drink expenses, and the tithes to be paid, can only have a net profit of 50 pounds per acre at most. However, if new agricultural technology is used, the cost per acre is still less than 100 pounds of rye. However, the yield per acre has reached 500 pounds or more. In this way, the income per acre is almost 400 pounds, which is basically 8 times the original income. The Gust family originally had 1,000 ugrams of arable land, which is 12,000 acres. Originally, the annual net income was 600,000 pounds. In fact, because of fallow, it may be only 300,000 pounds. But since the use of fertilizers, the fields do not need to be fallow, and the annual income has reached 4.8 million pounds of rye. So much rye is worth 80,000 gold coins according to the market price. Even if it is sold at the lowest wholesale price, with a 70% discount on the market price, it is worth 56,000 gold coins. So much money basically dumbfounded the Gust family. You know, their family's annual income used to be only a few thousand gold coins. In addition, Baron Gust's youngest son John, Miss Gust's younger brother, was only 14 years old when he followed Albert to Amerigo Island as a servant. Baron Gust knew that he and his eldest son Alan were both incompetent. Otherwise, the Gust family would not have been marginalized by Marin. Now, seeing that the youngest son John is still smart. So Baron Gust simply let John be Albert's servant. It would be best if he could learn some skills from Prince Albert, who is said to be very smart. Even if he can't learn anything, as a brother-in-law, Prince Albert will definitely take care of it. Seeing the Gust family come back to life, many marginalized families are jealous and crazy. Then they suddenly remembered that Prince Simon was still single. So, a bunch of marginalized noble families sent their best girls to stay in Auric, organize some noble balls, and frequently invite Prince Simon to participate, trying to impress Prince Simon, marry themselves, and win a chance to revive their families. However, these families did not know that old Hoffman was determined to let Simon marry a princess. Therefore, old Hoffman was very dissatisfied with the seduction of those noble ladies. Then, Simon was confined and was not allowed to attend the balls organized by those noble ladies. Marin was also a little speechless about old Hoffman's princess plot. However, he couldn't persuade old Hoffman, so he let him go. In fact, how difficult is it for Simon to find a princess? He is the third son and has no right of inheritance. In the future, according to the normal script, Marin will probably make him a baron and give him a baronship to let him live freely. But, would the princesses of those vassal states be willing to marry a baron? Any princess with outstanding appearance must want to marry a prince with inheritance rights. In the future, I can be a queen or a duke or countess. Baroness, it seems a bit low class. Only those princesses of ugly or weak vassal states will marry a prince without inheritance rights. And old Hoffman is planning to let Simon find a princess of a weak vassal state as his wife. In this way, the second generation of the Hoffman family can finally have a princess daughter-in-law. Just when the influence of the court ball was still fermenting, Kohler suddenly came to report urgently, Duke George of Saxony was defeated in West Frisia. Marin was shocked. You know, George spent a lot of money to destroy the enemy this time, and gathered 10,000 troops to come to West Frisia for reinforcement. It is said that George personally led 15,000 troops to West Frisia to find the main force of the West Frisia Resistance Army to seek a decisive battle. Logically speaking, George has so many soldiers and most of them are elite veterans. Even if he can't beat the Guides army, he won't be defeated so quickly. You know, among the 13,000 troops of the Guides army, 3,000 are pure losers. There are only 10,000 with strong combat effectiveness. Facing the 15,000 troops led by George himself, they can't be so strong. It's like this, young master, it is said that it was the Duke of Guides, Charles II, who hired another 4,000 Swiss mercenaries to join the war and defeated the Duke of George's army. No wonder. Marin nodded. If there were another 4,000 Swiss mercenaries, it would make sense. After all, the combat effectiveness of Swiss mercenaries must be stronger than that of the Saxon army. Besides, do you know the leader of this Swiss mercenary? I know him. Could it be Sieg? Marin remembered that the Swiss mercenary leader he knew seemed to be only Sieg. Moreover, if it weren't for Sieg's mercenary group, his territory, Texel Island, might have been occupied by the then Frisian noble republic. It was Captain Sieg. Moreover, this time Captain Sieg and his 4,000 Swiss mercenaries were too cunning. They didn't show up at all when the war started, but hid aside. When the Saxon army and the main force of the Principality of Guides' army had been fighting for a long time and both sides were exhausted, they suddenly attacked from the flank and defeated the left wing of the Saxon army in one fell swoop. Then, the Saxon army fled. First they ambushed, and then when the enemy was tired, they suddenly attacked the left wing. This siege is not simple, he even used military tactics. Young master, I heard that Captain Sieg seemed to have learned the ambush from you, and then he suddenly got the hang of it and learned to fight with his brain instead of brute force. Now, Captain Sieg is known as the Fox in Switzerland. His Sieg mercenary group is also known as the Fox mercenary group. Did you learn from me? But this Sieg is quite good. After all, he is a genius for being able to understand this without me teaching him hand in hand. You know, letting the main force engage the enemy first, dampening the enemy's morale, and then sending elite troops to suddenly attack from the enemy's flank or back, that was the trick of Emperor Taizong of Tang, Li Shimin. Li Shimin's black armor cavalry was specifically designed to attack the enemy's flank or back when the enemy's morale was frustrated. With this trick, Li Shimin helped the Tang dynasty to conquer thousands of miles of rivers and mountains. The later hero Genghis Khan was also very good at using this trick. Specifically, first use the main force of 100,000 cavalry to confront the enemy, or use the Mangadai tactic to consume the enemy. Wait until the enemy is tired of chasing and their morale is low. Suddenly, send elite troops to encircle the enemy on the left and right. Relying on this tactic, the Mongolian cavalry swept across the Eurasian continent. Even the Japanese devils in later generations are very good at this trick. This is how Chiang Kai-shek's army was defeated again and again by the Japanese. It was only later that they encountered the 8th Route Army, which never confronted the Japanese head-on, that the Japanese's trick did not work. If they don't confront you head-on, you can't consume personnel and morale. You want to outflank from left to right, but you can't find where the opponent is. The consequence is that Chiang Kai-shek's army is getting smaller and smaller, while the 8th Route Army is getting larger and larger. By the end of the anti-Japanese war, the strength of both sides in the Civil War was close. Sieg was indeed gifted to come up with such a tactic in Europe in the early 16th century when tactics were rigid. However, the Swiss don't seem to be on the same side as me. Therefore, Sieg may meet me on the battlefield one day. At that time, I have to guard against him using this trick. Of course, it is unlikely to ambush the East Frisian army. Because every time he goes to war, Marin's scouts will be spread out very far. Moreover, they all carry telescopes. It is very difficult to ambush Marin. George's 15,000 troops were in high spirits when they set out. However, it is said that only 3,000 people have escaped back to Groningen. Marin is sure that George will soon lose West Frisia. At that time, there will be a good show to watch. After all, George has many allies. When George finds allies, there will be another big show to be staged. Chapter 298 Negotiation Invitation. According to the current situation, there is no problem for the Duchy of Guedes to completely occupy West Frisia. You know, at present, the number of the Guedes army is as high as 16,000, the previous decisive battle lost thousands of people, and George, the Duke of Saxony, has less than 3,000 people left. Now, the army of the Duchy of Guedes has occupied the western half of West Frisia and is heading towards Groningen. It won't be long before they arrive and surround Groningen. Marin doesn't think that George will take these 3,000 troops to defend Groningen and confront the army of the Duchy of Guedes, because George is the Duke of Saxony, and he has many ways to retreat. There is no need to sacrifice himself for the temporary gains and losses of Groningen. Therefore, the result afterwards is nothing more than the Duke of Saxony George running away, and the troops of the Duchy of Guedes occupying the city of Groningen. However, if anyone thinks this is the final conclusion, it would be too naive. Because, no matter how useless George, the Duke of Saxony, is, he is still the Duke of Saxony, not some cat or dog. Moreover, after seeing George suffer such a big loss, the Elector of Saxony could not stand idly by. After all, the Duke of Guedes not only hit George, but also hit the face of the Wettin family. Therefore, at that time, the Saxon nobles must come out in full force for a group fight. In addition, Emperor Maximilian I owed the Duchy of Saxony a great favor because the former Duke of Saxony Albrecht sent troops to help quell the rebellion in Flanders in 1492. At that time, the counterattack coalition must include the army of the Habsburg family. In other words, it is the army of the Netherlands to which the Habsburg family belongs. Therefore, after occupying West Frisia, Duke Charles II of Guedes will usher in a wave of group fights. However, as long as the army of the Duchy of Guedes survives this wave of group attacks, then it can be considered to have survived. After all, some allies can organize troops for George once, but they will not do it a second time. Because they are not George's parents and will not be responsible for George to the end. Being able to help organize a group to fight is already a great honor. The biggest reliance of the Principality of Guedes is probably the Swiss mercenaries. In other words, the supporters behind the Principality of Guedes are the French. Because those Swiss mercenaries were actually tacitly allowed by the French to help the Principality of Guedes. However, it is impossible for the French to publicly send troops to help the Principality of Guedes. Because the French are also unwilling to openly tear their faces with the Holy Roman Empire. In this way, France will also fall into a situation where it is attacked by Spain, the Holy Roman Empire and the United Kingdom. Fortunately, the British fortress Calais has been conquered by France, and the British ability to interfere with France with the army has been greatly reduced. Of course, if the Holy Roman Empire and the United Kingdom form an alliance and let the British army land in the Netherlands, it is also possible. Therefore, France must also guard against the merger of the Habsburg family and the British. Therefore, it is impossible to publicly send troops to intervene. All France can do is probably to provide funding and tacitly allow Swiss mercenaries to help the Principality of Guedes. Moreover, as long as the current Swiss mercenaries, especially Sieg's mercenary group, stay, the Principality of Guedes may not have no chance of winning the next battle against the coalition. As long as the old trick is repeated, and Sieg's Swiss mercenaries suddenly rush out from the side when the war is stalemate, even the coalition will be unlucky. Moreover, it is easier to finish because it is a coalition. Because the coalition must be a patchwork of troops with mixed combat effectiveness. At that time, the flank must be a mixed legion, and Sieg's Swiss mercenaries will definitely have no big problems in attacking such a mixed army. Therefore, after some deductions, Marin found that the final result was that the Principality of Guedes continued to win, and this was also in the interests of Marin. Why? Because Marin's final plan was to take advantage of the opportunity of the Principality of Guedes' army defeating the coalition to propose the purchase of West Frisia. By then, George was desperate and saw that he could not recover the Principality of Guedes, so he might as well sell it to Marin and recover some costs. In this way, Marin can successfully seize West Frisia. As for going to war with the Principality of Guedes after buying West Frisia, what is Marin afraid of? Because the Marin phalanx with strong long-range capabilities is not afraid of the Swiss phalanx. Moreover, as long as the reserve troops are kept and the flank assault of Sieg is defended, it is not a problem to defeat the army of the Principality of Guedes. After all, the Principality of Guedes seems to have no other way except this killer. In other words, this tactic is almost equivalent to the killer move and trump card of the Principality of Guedes. As long as this trump card is broken, the other party will have nothing to fear. As for the alliance between Marin and the Principality of Guedes, this is not a problem. Because when Marin and the Principality of Guedes formed an alliance, it was actually a secret alliance without any legal documents. Therefore, even if the Principality of Guedes turned against each other, it didn't matter. Because no one knew that we were allies. In fact, the reason why we chose to form a secret alliance was because Marin and Charles II had ulterior motives. At the beginning, the two families agreed to divide West Frisia together. However, both Marin and Charles II had the ambition to take West Frisia alone. Therefore, their alliance was not written on paper. In other words, both parties were harboring evil intentions, waiting to defeat each other and monopolize West Frisia afterwards. Therefore, it was only a matter of time before the two families turned against each other. However, for now, what Marin had to do was to appease Charles II so that he would not have to worry about facing the group fight of the Saxons. For this reason, Marin wrote a letter to Charles II, stating that he would withdraw from the fight for West Frisia and was willing to give Groningen to Charles II. As for the reason, he had occupied such a large principality as the bishopric of Munster, and West Frisia was no longer in his eyes. Charles II was really happy after receiving Marin's letter. As long as Marin gave up coveting West Frisia, he could take West Frisia alone. Moreover, Charles II was not worried that Marin would turn against him afterwards. At least, when George organized a multinational coalition to attack him, Marin would not intervene. And if his army defeated the multinational coalition, then Marin's army could also be defeated. Therefore, Charles II thought there was nothing to be afraid of Marin's threat. When Marin was thinking about West Frisia's plan, Rome suddenly sent an invitation letter to invite Marin to participate in a negotiation after the autumn harvest. As for what kind of negotiation? Naturally, it was about Spain and Portugal revising the Treaty of Tordesillas. In the original history, Julius II naturally agreed to the original version of the Treaty of Tordesillas in order to win over Spain. Moreover, Spain in the original history had no other ideas, just wanted to keep it the same. But this life is different. Because of Marin's intervention, the Spaniards set their sights on the spice trade interests in India. Therefore, the original Treaty of Tordesillas must be revised by the Spaniards. Only the Portuguese, because the original Treaty of Tordesillas is beneficial to them, want to keep it the same. In fact, Marin had already discussed with Julius II to support the Spanish trade interests in India. However, the Spanish could not take all the benefits. Therefore, it was necessary to let them give up their interests in America. Because Marin had set his sights on America. In order to force the Spanish to give up their interests in America, Julius II even planned to invite French representatives to participate in the negotiations and force the Spanish to give up America. Anyway, for France, the enemy of the Spanish, anything that was not good for Spain was what they were happy to see. The main purpose of Marin's participation in the talks was to explain the Songhai Empire in West Africa and the ancient Zimbabwe Empire in Southern Africa, so that Spain and Portugal could choose one of them, and then spend the efforts of the two countries to let them put more energy into conquering the two golden countries. Therefore, in this negotiation, Marin actually used to be a commentator. In the name of Einstein's disciple, he explained the information of the two golden countries in detail to the two countries, and lured the two countries to conquer the two countries. As for opposing Spain's continued dominance of the Americas, Julius II has already chosen a suitable target: France. The French must oppose the Spaniards taking all the benefits, and France has a strong voice because of its strong national strength. It is most appropriate for them to force Spain to give up its interests in the Americas. It is not appropriate for other people or other forces to force Spain. For example, Marin, or even Julius II himself, is not appropriate. Only powers like France, with their voice and power, and enemies of Spain, are most appropriate for them to mess with Spain. In this way, Julius II and Marin can both get themselves out. Even the invitation to France to participate in the negotiations was not made by Julius II himself, but Julius II hinted to the Portuguese to ask France to be a notary. The Portuguese were hinted that a great power like France not only had the right to speak, but was also an enemy of Spain. Asking it for help would definitely be beneficial to them. Therefore, the French were openly invited by the Portuguese to participate in the talks. And Louis XII was also happy to make things difficult for the Spaniards, so he also agreed to send representatives to participate in the talks. When the autumn harvest is over, Marin can ride south to Rome and participate in the renegotiation of the Treaty of Tordesillas as a commentator. Chapter 299 Cement. Volcanic ash. After more than 2 years of long-term construction, a high-level reservoir with an area of up to 0.1 square kilometers was finally built on the north bank of the Leda River, 15 kilometers east of Leer County. For the reason, please refer to Chapter 308 of The King of German Mercenaries. This high-level reservoir is 20 meters high and consumes a lot of bricks, cement and steel bars. Among them, the bottom of the reservoir is paved with bricks and then coated with cement as a guarantee of no leakage. And the surroundings are reinforced concrete. Of course, it is not pure reinforced concrete, otherwise, Marin would not have so many steel bars. The surrounding walls are still built with bricks first, and then reinforced concrete is added. Although it cannot be compared with the solidity of those large reservoirs in later generations, this is also a small reservoir, and the strength of its surroundings is sufficient. The water of the reservoir comes from the Leda River. The craftsmen arranged dozens of Dutch windmills to deliver water to the high-level reservoir day and night. The water in the reservoir has a discharge channel on the north side. But in this discharge channel, a row of hydraulic forging hammers are working non-stop. Because the water level of the reservoir was too high, and the Dutch windmills could not reach it, the craftsmen built a water pool for relaying in the middle, which was also a cement pool. By relaying water, the ability to pump water into a 20-meter-high reservoir was achieved. However, such a huge siege cost Marin 200,000 gold coins and more than 2 years of construction. But Marin had no choice, because the northwestern part of Germany was all plains, and there was really no place with a high water level difference. Unlike England, there are many high-drop rivers in the mountains that are suitable for driving water conservancy machinery. Really helpless, Marin wanted to use hydraulic machinery again, so he built a man-made high-level reservoir. However, he didn't expect the cost to be so high. Originally, Marin planned to build a 1 square kilometer high-level reservoir, but the estimated cost at the time was 1 million gold coins, which scared Marin. So, it was later changed to 0.2 square kilometers. However, as the repairs were being repaired, it was found that the cost might be higher than expected. So it was changed to 0.1 square kilometers. However, it still cost as much as 200,000 gold coins. The main reason is that the price of steel is too expensive. If Marin had not built an iron-making blast furnace and a steel-making open-hearth furnace himself, and used the high-priced steel of the same era to make steel bars, the cost would have been estimated to have steadily exceeded 1 million. Although the water storage capacity is insufficient, there is no need to worry about insufficient water because there are dozens of Dutch water wheels constantly pumping water. Therefore, the row of hydraulic forging hammers is sufficient to start work. When Marin inspected this reservoir and the supporting forging base, the craftsman expressed confidently. In the future, plate armor forging will become a piece of cake, and it can be mass-produced quickly. Marin was very happy, although plate armor will eventually be eliminated by muskets. However, in the case that muskets are not very popular in Europe, plate armor is still very popular in Europe for the time being. Because of this school of hydraulic forging hammers, the speed of producing plate armor at the forging base will not only be accelerated, but also the cost will be greatly reduced. Moreover, hydraulic forging hammers can be used not only to forge plate armor, but also to forge weapons such as swords. Plate armor will be eliminated within a few decades, but swords have a longer life than plate armor. At least, the cavalry persisted until the first half of the 20th century when machine guns became popular. The cavalry swords naturally accompanied the cavalry. Looking at the large row of hydraulic forging hammers, Marin was eager to try. He was ready to be an international arms supplier. Of course, it was not selling advanced weapons such as missiles and aircraft, but selling low-end weapons such as plate armor and swords. Moreover, selling such weapons also made a lot of profit. Touching the tall walls around the high-level reservoir, Marin felt what it meant to be strong and solid. So, Marin wanted to use reinforced concrete for his own city of Auric. In the past 2 years, the steel bars of Marin's steel plant have basically been used to repair the reservoir, and so has cement. Now that the high-level reservoir has been repaired, it is equivalent to not knowing where to sell the products of the steel plant and cement production base. So Marin decided to add reinforced concrete to the outside of the Auric city wall, making the city of Auric a strong city that cannot be bombarded by artillery. You know, Auric is Marin's lifeblood, and his wife and children are in it. If he was fighting outside, and Auric was conquered, and his wife and children were killed, he simply didn't know how to face it. If his wife and children died, what was the point of him conquering a big country? It would probably fall apart in a blink of an eye like the Alexander Empire. Therefore, the solidity and safety of the city of Auric are also very important. However, once cement is used to build the capital, then, cement must be displayed to the world. After all, Auric is the capital, and there are many foreign envoys coming and going, so it is impossible to keep it secret. Therefore, Marin decided to learn from the plots in some novels and said to the outside world this is Roman volcanic ash. But, damn, he has no territory in Italy. Therefore, he needs to find a reason. For example, a volcano was discovered in his colony, where volcanic ash suitable for construction was produced. Volcanic ash cement is actually a very good building material. Marin studied history. When he was studying in his previous life, his teacher introduced Roman volcanic ash cement, which is made by mixing volcanic ash and quicklime to form mortar, and then mixing it with volcanic tuff of different particle sizes to form a wood-like structure, adding seawater to trigger a thermochemical reaction. Although this kind of volcanic ash cement is generally not strong, it has a very powerful characteristic: it can withstand wind and rain erosion. The ancient Roman cement buildings in Rome are still standing even in the 21st century. Unlike the teaching building of the university where Marin studied in his previous life, which was built in 1996 and had cracked walls. Fortunately, it is in the eastern plains and there are no earthquakes. If it were in the western crustal unstable area, this kind of building quality would cause a whole building of college students to die if there was an earthquake. Of course, this is because some unscrupulous businessmen use substandard materials. However, it is true that ordinary Portland cement is not as resistant to wind and rain as Roman volcanic ash cement. Of course, that refers to ordinary Portland cement. The cement made by Marin using fly ash left after coal combustion has good crack resistance and corrosion resistance, and its quality is no worse than Roman cement. The only problem is that a large amount of fly ash is needed. It just so happens that Marin used a lot of coal to cook salt, so there was a lot of fly ash, which made the raw materials of fly ash cement very sufficient. If someone else were to change, they might not be able to get so much fly ash. Moreover, in Western Europe, only the Ruhr area of Germany and the United Kingdom are rich in coal. And this is also the main reason why Britain and Germany became industrial powers at that time. The French wanted to become an industrial power, but they lacked coal. So, they later became the usury empire. As for Spain and Italy, they could not develop in the 19th century, and it was not their fault that they were idiots, but that the two countries really had no coal. You said that this steam engine burned coal. Without coal, how could they develop modern industry? Even the rise of China is inseparable from the huge coal reserves. Without the dust all over the sky, how can there be development? Can everyone become a developed country by writing poems and bragging? Marin must keep the formula of cement a secret. Even the manufacturing method of Roman volcanic ash cement must be kept secret by Marin. When others ask, Marin will say that this is a special kind of volcanic ash mined from overseas. This kind of thing also exists in Rome. Well, you can go to Rome to have a look. Now, there should be this kind of volcanic ash on the Italian peninsula. After all, Pompeii was buried by volcanic ash. Otherwise, why don't you go to excavate Pompeii? Not only is there volcanic ash, but also valuable antiques can be dug out. As for other countries, such as Britain and France, oh sorry, there are no volcanoes in your country, so I can't do anything about it. Otherwise, French demon, you continue to rob Italy. As for the problem of technology leaks, it is unlikely in this era. Why? Because there is little population mobility in this era. Because it is still in the serf era, the freedom of serfs is restricted and they cannot leave the manor at will. Therefore, there are few outsiders in various places. As long as the base is set up in the countryside, rather than in a crowded city, confidentiality can be guaranteed. Want to catch a spy? Just check who is a foreigner, catch him and torture him. As long as the craftsmen are controlled, the possibility of leaks is very low. Therefore, Marin has always used serf craftsmen, who are easy to control. If it is those citizen craftsmen like uncles, it will be difficult to control and it is very easy to leak. With the ancient Roman volcanic ash in front as a cover, and Marin's strong military force, it is not easy to mess with. Many people probably choose to look up ancient Roman books and find the method of making volcanic ash cement. Of course, even if they find the method of making ancient Roman cement, Marin is not worried. Because others don't know the reinforced concrete technology. This is the technology with the most military strategic value of cement. Chapter 300, America is still called America. Columbus has been living a comfortable life recently. Although he dared not go to Las Vegas to find girls because of his weak body, he was still very comfortable and stable teaching a group of smart teenagers about navigation knowledge in the captain's school. To be honest, he has no regrets about his status and the title of the first discoverer of India. The only thing that made him unhappy was that the Portuguese insisted that it was Vasco da Gama who discovered India first. As for why Columbus returned to Europe first, the Portuguese argued that Vasco da Gama visited many countries in India, which took too long, so Columbus took the lead. Columbus was very unhappy, so he decided to take advantage of Marin's opportunity to know the specific map, wait until his body recovered, and go out again to discover the legendary China, so as to clear his name again. However, Marin's plan seemed to be to let Amerigo go with him to discover China. This made Columbus a little unhappy, but there was nothing he could do. Recently, Marin thought of a compromise, that is, to explore the China route, let Columbus go. However, the naming right of the savage continent was given to Amerigo. In this way, Columbus won the honor of the first person to discover China for the exploration of China, and Amerigo won the naming right of the savage continent. In the future, the savage continent will be called America. So, Marin called Columbus back and discussed this matter with him. In fact, the route that Marin asked Columbus to explore the Ming dynasty this time was not the Pacific route, but the Malacca route. After all, the Pacific route is Marin's secret route to make a fortune. If this route is taken, even if Columbus discovered the Ming dynasty, it cannot be announced to the public. Only the Malacca route can be announced to the public. Moreover, on this voyage, Marin decided to severely cheat Portugal. How to cheat? It's very simple. Columbus brought a few more ships over, among which the other ships were 250 class armed merchant ships or Hoffman class battleships. However, bring 2 Portuguese caravels. What are these 2 sailing ships used for? Of course, it was used to frame Portugal. Marin planned to have a group of sailors disguised as Portuguese pirates and raise the Portuguese royal flag. After arriving at the coast of Daming, the sailors on the 2 caravels would first land and plunder the place to create a bad reputation. When the Daming navy appeared, the caravels would use artillery to sink 2 warships of the Daming navy. In this way, the hatred between the Portuguese and Daming would grow. After a while, Columbus led the Hoffman-class battleship and the 250-class armed merchant ship to appear, bringing Chinese translators to deal with Daming, and identified that it was a Portuguese ship, and told Daming the Portuguese flag. Later, the Portuguese really came to Daming. It is estimated that the first reaction of the Daming navy was to fire. And the confused Portuguese, even if they wanted to explain, they had to have a translator who understood Chinese. At that time, even if they found the route, they would not be accepted by the Ming dynasty. Thinking of this, Marin laughed and felt that he was really a genius. In this way, Portugal probably won't be able to trade with Daming for a long time. In addition, Europe's lack of understanding of the strength of the Ming dynasty may lead to a brain-dead plan like King Philip II of Spain, who wanted to conquer the Ming dynasty with only 10,000 or 20,000 people. If Portugal really did this, Marin would be very happy. In this way, Portugal can forget about doing business with the Ming dynasty. Perhaps, at that time, he could send spies to Portugal to promote the plan of conquering the Ming dynasty and induce Portugal to make the decision to attack the Ming dynasty. After Columbus arrived, he was still a little unhappy when he heard Marin's arrangement. After all, the savage continent was discovered by himself, but he had to name it after Amerigo. However, Marin also said that if he obtained the naming rights of the savage continent, he would have to give up the opportunity to explore China, and he could only choose one of the 2. Moreover, exploring China can be meritorious and can be rewarded. However, there is no merit in obtaining the naming rights of the savage continent. In fact, Marin was equivalent to helping Columbus make a decision. After all, Columbus was very utilitarian. Marin told Columbus that if he completed the task of exploring the China route, he could promote Columbus from the baron's title to the level of a full baron. A full baron is also called a baron, and his fiefdom is 2,000 ugrams of arable land, which is equivalent to Adler's level. The deputy baron is 1,500 ugrams of arable land. A baron is 1,000 ugrams of arable land, which is Columbus's current title. With the land and income doubled, and the honor of being the first to discover, Columbus was finally tempted and chose to explore the China route, giving up the naming rights of the savage continent. You know, under Marin's command, it's not too easy to get the credit for exploring this route. Basically, it's just looking for precise coordinates according to the approximate map. For a great navigator like Columbus, it's simply a gift of credit. So, facing the temptation of promotion to the title and the honor of the first discoverer, Columbus succumbed. Although, he knew that the first person to discover India and China might be Marin's ascetic teacher named Einstein. However, the ascetic monk was indifferent to fame and fortune, and it was impossible for him to jump out and compete with him for this honor. Therefore, he could safely and shamelessly claim to be the first discoverer. After seeing that Columbus finally gave up the right to name the savage continent, Marin was actually relieved. According to his habits in his previous life, he was more accustomed to calling the savage continent America. Therefore, he wanted to give Amerigo a chance to keep the name of America. However, this depends on Columbus's intention. After all, America was discovered by Columbus. Moreover, Columbus is also Marin's #1 navigator. If the savage continent is not named Columbus Continent, but renamed America, Columbus will definitely not be happy. However, Marin does not want America to be renamed Columbus Continent, which is such a strange name. In the future, should America be called Columbia? Oh, it sounds so strange. So, Marin thought about it and decided to use the credit of exploring the China route to tempt Columbus to give up the naming rights of America. He knew that Columbus's weakness was that he was too utilitarian. So, he gave two options. If he chose to explore the China route, because of Marin's approximate map, it would be very easy to get credit and honor, basically giving credit. And choosing the naming rights of the savage continent, although he earned a reputation, there was no benefit. So, Columbus, who was very utilitarian, really chose to explore the China route. In this way, Marin could also naturally name the savage continent after Amerigo. As for Amerigo's opinion, he was originally a junior in front of Columbus, and his reputation was not as loud as Columbus. Giving him the right to name a new continent would definitely make him happy. How could he not be dissatisfied? In this way, with Marin's clever intervention, America was finally called America.